Okay.
This is Post 5, Discussion Group 3. I'm Emma.
I'm Ruby, sorry.
It's Yura.
Celeste. Okay. Yeah.
So,
The first one we all answered. Culturally sustaining pedagogy.
I don't have it open yet, but I thought that was a really cool term. Like, I thought that was a good place to move from culturally relevant pedagogy, that it's like, you can't just, making sure that you're teaching in a way that keeps everything relevant and, like, up to date and progress, keeps it real. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was honestly really confused on that. Like I said, it challenges teachers to promote the different and changing ways that students engage with culture. But at the same time, I was like, I also said like Paris challenges us to support aspects of their language, literacies, and cultural traditions. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm just thinking, like, how does a culture change? Like, with the youth, I was just really confused how I apply this.
I think maybe
for
part
the
of it, so I know I said this a lot last week too, but in my social studies class, we have been talking a lot about the Since Time Immemorial curriculum. Mm-hmm. That's like the one.
I should log you in because it's a new password.
Oh, okay, cool. It's
Wi-Fi.
taken a really long, my computer does this fun thing when it dies, where then when I try to start it up again, it takes like 10 minutes. So with the Since Time Immemorial curriculum, like a lot of the teaching in like regular social studies curriculum in the U.S., wherever you go, when they do even acknowledge that like Indigenous people exist, it's all in the past, and it's all just like, here's what happened when the white settlers first encountered the Native Americans in 1852 in this place,
the
and
slaves
it's like,
and stuff.
well, but yeah, I mean, but just with like Native culture and tribes, that everything that's taught is taught like as if they're dead and gone, and it's a thing of the past.
Okay.
And so we're not teaching about like what is the
Going on
experience
now?
of like Native Americans in the U.S. today. We teach about how they had like powwows and maybe that they went hunting and stuff, and we act like it's like gone in regular curriculum. And so it's like making sure that if you are going to teach a unit about like the Native people in the area where you're teaching, that you can't teach it in a way where all you're talking about is like, here's some black and white photos and here's what happened when the white people first came.
So it would be like an example of like African Americans, how they were slaves, but like actually talking about now and like talking about recent problems.
So you could talk about like slavery, and then you could also talk about some of the. Oh, that's pleasant. I was reading about the attack last night, and then you could also talk about like the like legacy of slavery and racism in the U.S. and how that continues to be an issue today.
Okay.
Another
is what I understood it to be.
Okay. Another thing that I think about.
For now it's ready.
Okay. Sorry, I have to input it. Stop. Sorry.
Sorry, Joe, you can't go faster.
Okay, so what I was thinking of that aspect would be in a similar way where we need to keep it about present news, and so thinking of migrant students, and with different political climates are different like students or migrant students, so they could be either changing from different locations but still the same culture. So then it the change of location also affects the culture, because I'm Mexican but I don't speak Mixteco or any of the native languages, and so the times have changed to that enough people from that region are coming to the United States that they're prevalent in the schools, and so we have to adjust adjust our practices so that we learn more about the language that they speak, and because it's different from Spanish, and there's still the same culture, but it's the different things within that culture. And also, just as generations build on, the culture also changes. So the culture that I live in, I think I'm very assimilated into this country, so I don't necessarily participate in a lot of things. Like today is Day of the Dead, and I'm going to Dia de los Muertos event at Wacom, but I've never celebrated Day of the Dead. It was only until college where like events came up and like I started participating and stuff, but I was not part of my culture because I'm more assimilated. So I think that also as time changes, the culture changes because of the generations that assimilate or acculturate, which is a word that we actually I'm not sure if it's for this one, but
it was one of those like words.
It all just forms together.
Yeah, definitely.
Does anybody else have anything to say about the culturally sustaining pedagogy?
I feel like you guys covered that one.
Oh, I guess we can talk about specific class. I guess we did include some, like, what it would be in our classroom.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like looking for curriculum that brings stuff to today. Like
Yeah.
In the present, not
keeps
just
things
past.
relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I didn't even realize that when I was in elementary school and middle school. It was always just past, like the history.
Yeah.
Never about today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes the past is not even taught, like, accurately.
Accurately.
Because it's very one-sided.
Yeah, well, that's like,
Great job.
especially with, I feel like, especially with Native American cultures, we learn about, like, we see pictures of people in, like, the feather headdresses and, like, learn about how they have powwows, and, like, that's it. And with a lot of other cultural studies, you learn about, like, traditional dance, traditional food, and some traditional music, and then maybe, like, oh, and here's the cool different language they spoke. It's so fun and exotic. And, like, that's all you learn, and then it's, like, a thing of the past.
Yeah.
And it has no relevance.
It's something I think about, too, sometimes, like, how am I supposed to, like, we're teaching elementary schools, for sure. It just depends on the grade, and as they're older, you can talk more about the reality of Thanksgiving. But, like, when they're in the younger grades, how do you talk about Thanksgiving without just telling them lies, you know?
I think you
And,
just
like, the whole,
ask
like-
them question. You just teach them to question what they're taught also. But yeah, and then it's so hard because you can't, well, I mean, it happens a lot where you,
video, by the way.
that's okay.
Okay.
I'm really, really gross.
Okay.
Whatever, I'm still here.
Sorry.
Yeah,
You just ask them questions?
You just have them, like, you teach younger kids how to look at things critically, I think. And then they can apply that to more, like, controversial topics more appropriately, like, as they get older. But, like, you can do stuff with them.
Like, how do you tell them what Thanksgiving is?
Well, I don't. I mean, I
lying
don't
to them.
there is like curriculum out there.
That could be
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but since
question.
time immemorial, it
It's been
actually
developed.
has been developed.
I have heard of, like, doing a lesson with first graders on Columbus, where instead of talking about making it people, they had the students sort of role play. You guys are the, like, gentle earthlings, and then you guys are the aliens who, like, come in and you, like, want to find out about what's happening with these, like, earthling people. And then they started, like, taking their stuff and taking some of the earth, and so they made it like aliens and humans, so that it wasn't like, so none of the students in the class had to feel like, oh, I'm a bad guy or I'm a good guy because of, and that, like, I've heard of that example with Columbus, where that's how they got, and then they talked to students about, how did you feel being one of the aliens? How did you feel being one of the earthlings in the, like, role play? And then they had the teacher was Columbus, basically. Like, the teacher was in charge of the aliens, and so was telling them, like, you go take that away from that person. You go take that person back to the spaceship with you. So none of the kids were in that role. But, like, they got them talking about, like, sort of a hard topic with making it not about
like
anyone. Yeah, making it so that it's not some way that any of the students would feel like they were stuck being on one side or the other.
Yeah.
Because I think you also, like, anytime you talk about something like that has race as a huge issue with, like, 6-year-olds, then they're like, well, is it my fault? Because I'm whatever. Like, that if they have a hard time. It's hard to have those conversations with kids and not have them feel like you're, like, attacking them.
Mm-hmm. I wrote that down just for one of our money questions, just in case we don't forget. Okay. How do you educate students about certain holidays in a correct way?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that, yeah.
What time was that at?
10
Like a minute ago?
8:30.
Yeah.
8:30. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Because it was 8:44 when you wrote it down. As I heard you.
Nice.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Cool. So next question.
These were...
That was also for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these were for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
How all of these questions will help you with the case study and the family engagement. What are some informal assessment tools of acculturation that might be helpful in filling out how do you say that?
Acculturation.
Acculturation. Quick screen. What specific assessments might you include in your case study?
I
don't know. I just said like home visits, having families come into the classroom, surveys, just having constant communication with the families and your students. For my case study, I'm just like asking my student like certain questions and going to observe her in her classroom, obviously, so that we can see how she interacts in different settings and stuff and with her peers in the classroom, just to slowly better get to know who she is.
When I was reading, I have a different edition. I have the first edition, so I don't know if this was in your guys' book in the second edition, but it was like a school puzzle or a class puzzle where each person has like their own puzzle. And I remember doing that in high school cheer.
Oh, really?
I thought it was the cutest idea. A senior in high school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I would draw like what's important to me, and then together as a cheer squad, would put it in a whole puzzle. And I just thought it was like really cool. And I also thought it said about like a cultural quilt. Have you guys heard of those? Where they draw things on a quilt and then they yarn them up. And I thought that would be really cool for my student because she just came from Mexico a couple years ago and she's still in the silent period. But she knows how to draw. Like she is so like perfect. Like when it comes to drawing, it's like perfection. It's like it's crazy. And so I just thought it would be a really fun and creative way because she doesn't like to speak a lot, but I know that drawing, I can definitely get to know her more through that way.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
I wrote pretty much similar assessment tools, home visits, reviewing school records, survey that I can know more about what the student, how the student learns best. I said that I would most likely have the survey, and which I did it on Monday as part of because I think there was an assignment for like the case study.
Yeah, the first part, the context.
And so I think that was the most applicable. And so I asked the student like different things about their like when did they learn English, just like going down the list, why, and the student would talk about like, oh well, I started school and that's where I learned, but sometimes my mom helped me, but not always. And I asked him what he liked to do in school and outside of school, so that gives me like different perspectives of his interests and stuff. I could incorporate those interests into the classroom as well. I also talked about how, the Essentials book where the student would talk about the most important thing of like school for me is, or the most important part of family is, and just different things that he values most important so that I can see what is the core of the student, what motivates him.
Mine was pretty funny.
Yeah. The next one's about the Funds of Knowledge project. And how did this new information about acceleration help you understand how you might perpetuate unfunded exceptions like the case of Mashadia? How can you distribute those assumptions or interpret the ticker tape?
I feel like it's about it was the girl who is like wears the veil at school, and so the teacher assumed that she like wouldn't talk to anyone and was like her whole world was her religion and like never did anything. It wasn't at all Americanized. Like was completely embedded in a home culture. And then she went and visited her at home, and the girl like didn't have the veil on and was just like hanging out and making jokes and having a good time. And she just put the veil on when she left, and like so it was just like the teacher was like, I made a lot of assumptions about her based on her physical appearance without ever like asking how. And like the teacher had been like, oh, I should probably revert to more like traditional lecture style teaching so that this student doesn't feel like uncomfortable in my class without ever like checking in with the student.
One of my friends that I tried to get into the EC program, the early childhood, so I took a couple of those classes. But this girl, she said she's Asian, but she was adopted when she was a baby. But she was like raised by an American family, so she literally knows nothing about the Asian culture or anything. But she just like her appearance is Asian, and I guess like one time she was in class and they were talking. Something came up about like the Asian culture, and her teacher like pointed her out in front of the entire class and was like, "Oh, will you like talk about this about the Asian culture?" And she just like felt like so on the spot and like judged because it was like she knew nothing about it because she was pretty much American on the inside. She was raised by an American family, just like But that like I always like remember that when I talk about assumptions. I'm like that like makes so much sense.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like being aware of your own assumptions and whatever biases you might have.
I also talked about kind of going back to like different perspectives, getting to know the students from inside and outside of the classroom, getting to know various aspects of their life, like their home life and their culture, their belief system, and how it all works together is part of the Funds of Knowledge. And I found that especially as we were doing the Funds of Knowledge because it's all interconnected. It all affects one another. It's just who you are at core affects how you are or how you will interact with other people in society. And it goes the same with the people that you were interacting with. They are... the way they interact with you is affected by how they grew up, how like what they believe is important to them, things like that. And then once you see a common thread or differences between, like the Funds of Knowledge will allow us to see common thread or differences between students, so you could incorporate that into the classroom. And it could be as simple as like they share similar experiences because of their race, or like they have a similar path of assimilation or acculturation, and just it overall lets the teachers know what kind of students are coming into the classroom.
I wonder how long it like actually takes for teachers to like get to know each of their students.
Yeah.
Because like you're only with them for what, like 9 months or 8 months or something like that. Like probably takes till like November, December to like actually like get to know all of your students because you have like so many. Like
well, and then if you're in like middle school or high school and you had like 150 kids for day,
that's like impossible.
Man, it's hard enough with 20 kids that you have for 6 hours, 7 hours a day.
Oh gosh, I didn't even think about that. Like how do teachers like really do that? Like
I feel like that's how you get so many people in middle school and high school to just slip through the cracks because the teachers just like
you don't get to know them on a personal
humanly
level.
Possible.
Yeah.
I think it also goes depends on like the teacher involvement with the like home connections, like home visits, like being open. I was volunteering with this brand new teacher, and so I learned a lot from volunteering with her because she's like going through the path that I'm going to be in a few years, and so I'm just like, she's new at this, and like I'm going to be in that state, so I need to learn from her as much and see what she's doing. And so by the time school started, she knew some things from her students because she was a teacher there last year, and so she like their former teachers would talk to her about them, and she would also see them around, or like they have the same parents. I had a student, well, it was my student, but I was volunteering in the classroom, and so this year he was like, oh, so-and-so says hi, and I was like, oh, how do you know him from last year? And then he was like, that's my brother. And that's like, oh, I had no idea. And so the families could be very much the same. And then just being part of different events that are going on in the school, even if they're not your own students, you will see connections. And that's like just tiny things that she didn't know all of her students and her, but just, I guess it develops slowly.
Yeah. Really. Just like ask them questions, have social conversations with them.
Yeah.
And take time to get to know them. You just have to make it a priority because it's hard to get any extra time.
Yeah. Should we move on to the third one? Okay. How can you find out about your school's culture and environmental factors? I just listed like a bunch of questions.
Yeah, me too.
I said, what are on the walls? What activities do they have? What programs do they have? How do they include cultures? How do they connect to the communities? How do they connect to families? What ELL programs do they have? How are they supporting the needs of each student in their classroom? That's what I said.
Yeah, I said you can like start off with basic information just from the OSPI report card because that will at least give you information about the demographics. And then you might be able to say like, well, there's probably like significant respect and value of these different cultures just because of the numbers of students that are there. Not necessarily. But, you know, if the OSPI report card tells you that there's only like one student who identifies as a certain ethnicity, there's probably not a lot of like built-in institutional support for that student in that culture just because it's so underrepresented, but maybe the school is like really great about incorporating all that stuff and so asking those questions.
I also asked questions. I was like, are the students' cultures being valued and respected, and is the school supporting their first language at home and school, and are schools understanding the rationale for L1? I don't know why I put AD, shelter and instructional strategies. But yeah, a lot of just questions.
I basically just said by simply like evaluating, which would be asking the questions, and by asking the questions you are seeing if it's being effective and if it addresses the needs. Some examples would be like assessing the first language support inside and outside the classroom, assessing the respect for the CLD families, and through verbal or nonverbal communication, and the accessibility of, as well as advocating for the programs and events. Like, are there events such as and activities that engage families, such as the EL literacy nights or family math nights, things like that? Like, do you physically see in place these things? Did you guys watch that one? It was like only like 8 minutes. The interviewing of the kids doing the interviewing on each other.
No.
Oh, it was.
Oh, I've seen it in a different class, so that's why I didn't watch it.
It was really cheesy, but that's not the video we like had to watch. So.
It was really cheesy.
It was really cheesy. What was it at? It was like kids just like interviewing each other. And it was just like, okay, back to you.
Oh, wait, never mind. I did not watch that video. I thought you were talking about a different video. No. I didn't watch that video.
It was kind of weird. Okay, the Cambodian refuge video. I thought it was interesting. Like, it put me in the head of, like, somebody who has been in that spot. And I didn't even realize how it, like, even tears the student away from the family. Like, I didn't even think about that, but it was, like, talking about how they feel, like, isolated and resented, and it makes, like, so much sense because their family doesn't understand what they're doing at school because they don't know that culture, and that makes so much sense.
And not even being able to, like, really communicate with your parents. Like, the one boy who was talking about, like, my mom and my grandma just, like, speak Cambodian and watch TV, and so I go play video games.
In my room, yeah.
Just
isolate
myself.
myself.
Like,
I know. I
every
can't
day
imagine
after
just being
school.
able to just talk to my mom.
Yeah, like, help me with my homework. Talk to them about my school day, like, what I did in school and what I learned, and you can't even communicate with them about, like, what you did in class, which is, like, so sad.
Yeah.
And about that boy talking about how he went into the principal's office for something, and, like, he couldn't even have his mom there to, like, back him up or anything.
Uh-oh.
It's still there.
Oh, good.
Yeah. He didn't, like, have his mom there to, like, back him up because she just didn't.
That's definitely illegal.
Yeah.
That his parents weren't there. Should we just do like the ABCD?
Yeah, I was A, and it kind of connects to that because my question was how might you include parents in the classroom community? And I kind of just thought like maybe doing like, because you know how there's like conferences and stuff. I was thinking maybe doing like monthly because I think weekly would be a lot and a lot of time for parents. But I think like monthly and like checking in with the parents and like telling them like, oh, this is what your kid's doing and this is what we're doing in the classroom.
This is what we're learning and stuff.
Do you mean like physically checking in, like have the parents come in once a month?
Yeah.
Like a group with all the parents, and
or
you're
like,
just kind of like presenting what you did for that month and what you learned. Or...
I don't know, but I think that would be a good idea too.
Yeah.
I think individually or as a group too. And I thought also, I don't know if I'm going to give homework to my students. I'm kind of like the one does not want to, but if I do, I think it'd be cool to have like an after-school homework club for just my class and have not just my students, but also the parents come in. I think it'd be a really great way to like interact with their parents.
Definitely. And then parents would
like,
also interact with each
yeah,
other.
and like see what they're learning and stuff and helping them out. And then I could also not just teach parents, but like they can help them out. So when they go back home and have another homework
That's
club,
a really good idea.
Yeah,
I like
guys,
that.
thanks. You guys are awesome. But yeah, those are my things. Or maybe doing like a potluck and inviting families to come for my classroom. But yeah,
That's a really good idea. I like that.
I think it'd be really cool to just like involve parents and just have it be not just like my students be a big family, but like just like the whole classroom and like the parents could also really connect, you know?
That's more like
really
of a
cool.
natural way too, instead of like having like a one-on-one meeting. Those can be like kind of like, awkward maybe, but like having like the open like homework club where they're like still getting to know like what their student is doing and how they're doing in like a cool way.
Yeah.
And you definitely want to have as much positive interaction with parents as possible so that when you call them to be like, your child punched another child today, it's not like the first time they hear from you is because their
You
kid's
also
in
have a good
trouble.
relationship with them,
Yeah.
and they know that you care about them, that you're not against them, and their students and stuff, their kid.
Yeah.
Also, like weekly calls, or just emails too, if you don't have the time to call all the parents and stuff. Just like telling them what the kids are doing, like like because most times we call parents for problems, so
behavior,
developing that communication of like constant like feedback of like, oh, they're doing this, like, and they're doing really great, but like something they could need help with at home, and because you are talking regularly and not always about bad things or problems, and it develops that sense of like
You're on their side.
consistent communication too.
At Cordata, my first practicum, I was at with a kindergarten class, and she had this like, I don't know if all the teachers there use it. It's called, I think it's like Goji. It's like a weird site.
Dojo?
It's like Class Dojo.
Is that Monsters? The Monsters?
Yes, and it's like all the parents are connected. Only the parents can see. Each of the students are on there. You can send instant, like pretty much like text messages through it. It's like messages.
Pictures.
You can send pictures.
Yeah.
There's like a rating system. Like you can like give your student doji points or whatever, and then the parents can go on there whenever throughout each of the school days or whenever, and like see how many doji points their kids are getting and if they're being good and safe and all that kind of stuff. I just think that's like a really good way for like the parents to just like easily check in with their students throughout the day, since like technology is so huge now. They can just like go on their phone and be like, oh, let me see how my kid's doing today, and like see pictures and stuff. Like, that's so cool.
There's a lot of cool things. Like Seesaw's a little bit simpler than Class Dojo. Like it's pretty much just taking pictures, and then you like type up a little thing, or you can audio record so the kids can say like, this is me doing whatever, and then the parents can listen to their kid explaining it. But yeah, it's the same thing. Like each kid has their own like little
Site,
like icon, basically, and so you like tag kids in it, so only the people who are tagged, their parents can see it. So it's a good way, like they post pictures of kids, and if parents don't want other people to see them, like you just wouldn't take any group shots of that kid or something. So it still like maintains their privacy.
Does B want to go next?
Yeah, I was B. I'm trying to find mine. Mine was about that whole thing where he went to the principal's office. Mine was around minute 6 in the video. How might you have handled the situation with the student that was being accused of being in a gang? How might that situation have been handled better? So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that was super illegal for him to be dragged in there with a police officer and not have his parents notified or there. I feel like if I was the teacher and I knew that was happening, I would 100% go to that meeting and be the advocate for the parent or for the student, like try to be the role that the parent should be. And then also do whatever I could to like stop the meeting from happening until the parent and a translator was notified and present and they could go. What did I say? Yeah. The student totally like identified the privilege that other girl had in her mom being able to call the principal and talk and just be like, this is what happened. And then the principal just was like, yep, cool, let's bring in a cop. Like that they just, So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I would just do everything I could to make sure that the parents were present. And if somehow I couldn't make that happen, then it would be my responsibility to take that role on and be a student's advocate.
And I feel like overall it's like the school's responsibility because it's a huge legality thing. But especially if no one's stepping up, then we would be the first ones. Not that we wouldn't be the first ones before that, but okay, MC. I was like, so when they talked about the love languages, which is actually funny because my boss, Shar Garo from Campus to Campus, just in case you guys ever meet her, she has talked about love languages like for so long. I've known her for at least 3 years, and since the first year. And she talked, when I was watching this video, I was like, oh my god, I know what you're talking about because Shar talked about it all the time. And I felt like I could relate to the experience of the students, even though they were Cambodian. I could relate to the part where their parents never praised them for their accomplishments, and it's not necessarily that I don't think that my family is proud of me. It's just more of an expected thing because for me personally, not for like, because I'm a good student, and so I've always shown good expectations or good performance, and so when anything fell short of that, then that's when I would get the attention. Like, oh, why not? Why aren't you perfect, pretty much? But it's not the same for my younger brother. Because I didn't have that, I try to also like praise him and I think my mom does praise him more than me because he needs it more. But I could relate to being not praised for the accomplishments and then also, like, when I do talk about those accomplishments, my family would not really understand what it means, so that's why I'm not being praised, because they see me doing great things, but they don't realize the impact it's making or the impact it's making on myself. And it has definitely affected the way I am, just because, like, at home, not that I don't get praise. My family loves me, tells me that I'm great all the time, It sounds like my family's horrible, but no. It's just, they've never looked at me and said, Emma, I'm really proud of you for doing this. And so when people do say that, and I feel like it happened a lot more when I was, like, graduating high school, because everyone's like, I would be getting scholarships, and it's like, Emma's so good, and she's receiving this money because of all these things. And I was like, oh, like, okay. And then just like within college, people were like, oh, I'm so proud of you for accomplishing. It just like more and more people are showing me praises, and I just like either get uncomfortable because I just don't know how to react to it, or like emotional because it's like, oh my god, like, you think I'm great. Yeah. And we hug and kiss, but as a family, but we don't, which is a difference from the Cambodian family because they don't really show emotions to one another, and we show emotions in the hugging and kissing because we greet, and in that way we hug and kiss, but we don't necessarily say I love you every day. I didn't start saying I love you to my mom after like a phone call. You know how you're always like, oh, I love you. I never started saying that until college, and other things that I saw similar was the way that the families showed their love was through working and giving the child like pretty much everything to survive. And so that's how I could also relate to that, because my mom was always working, so she wasn't spending a lot of time with me, but she was just doing this because she loved me so much that she's just gonna work every day for life. And I also think that we have different love languages. So even within cultures, because like I was talking about, the language between my mom and I is different between my mom and my brother. So I also think that we could look at love languages by individual too. Mm-hmm. And that's how my boss presented it to me. So that's the way I most like link it to my head, I guess. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Okay, I was D, and it was how might you start building bridges in your classroom that might include the aspects of the third culture as explained in the video. So I would feel so sad if my students like came home from their like school day and were just like isolated and resented by their family. So I think that like a good way would just be like simply just like having a translator when families come in to visit, so you could get to know them, doing home visits, asking the parents to like come into the classroom and see what they're doing throughout the day, and just like having an open communication with them. But like mainly like having a translator, because you can't really do any of those things without like having a translator. But yeah, that's all I said.
Okay.
I could add some stuff too about unless you want to go.
Oh no, I was going to talk about our assignment, but you can go.
Okay. There was this part where Fadi was a student that was like, it was platonic physical contact, and the teacher saw it as as a result behavior of something he's seen, like abuse or something like he's seen before, and he just assumed that it was that his intervention was the correct intervention, and then when he did intervene, it actually made the situation worse. And so it's important to value different cultures in every sense and not automatically assume they are going through something because of trends that we've seen. Like, we will read about things like this culture does this or this culture does that, and it's very much true, but it's also kind of stereotyping.
Yeah. Well, and like with that it's like, oh yeah, inappropriate physical contact in children is what happens when kids have been like sexually abused. And so then when he saw a kid like to not stop, to just go like, this is what's happening with something like that. That's so like, you know, I was talking about how then they had really, the kid had really like uncomfortable interviews with people, and you didn't understand what was going on, and like, yeah, that's like, yikes. You don't want to go down that inappropriately. Like, take some time to get to know your kids.
Awesome. I just have a few questions for the assignment that's due, since we only have like 2 more minutes left.
Yeah.
So we had to turn in the context part, right? That's our 30 points.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't turned that in yet.
Okay, and that's probably due Sunday.
What do we have to do? Like, where do we turn it in at?
We just submit it to
the
the
case
case
study.
study, and then later you'll just resubmit something else to it.
She sees all the submissions, so even if you submit things later for the same thing, it's all there for her.
Mm-hmm. She sees it all. So, like, you'll submit this part by Sunday. I think it's by Sunday. It doesn't even have a due date, so I'm just going to say this the date.
I think it's just part of,
I think it's like a...
Yeah, so we just do the contextual information.
Yeah, and then, like,
understand.
Maybe, like, next week we have to do, like, the language and learning history, so then you'll just resubmit that. And she'll have both of them still.
Okay.
If you just resubmit it.
And what I did, I don't know if this is correct or not. There's a session
Here.
I can put it. So when on for the post session 5, it says a whole bunch of stuff, but on the third one, it says the language profile form and application quick screen. I only did one because I felt like the other one was very...
Oh, we had to do one of those?
Yeah, these are like the assessments we're supposed to do with our case studies
to fill out the context one?
Well, I think there's some of the assessments we're just like supposed to do with them over the quarter, and they're like sort of preliminary ones, so they'll give you kind of the context of your student, like they would help you with the context.
I feel like this is...
Oh my gosh.
I don't like
feel
this
like
whole
she has,
setup
like,
because
she thinks
this
she's
is out of
organized.
order.
But it's
That's
like,
confusing. I don't know
she
if
should
we
have like
do
a
that.
section where it says, case study assignment only, do the context one,
Yeah.
fill out one of these forms by this end of, like, oh my gosh. So we have to fill out one of these forms or both of them?
I think we're supposed to do both.
I looked at them, and this was pretty much like a survey little thing of their whole background.
Should we finish
Mhm.
this up?
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, done.
Bye, Joy.
Wait, should we say our...
our
Money.
heavy question was
Oh,
what? We
it's a-
talked about it. Oh, we just
Oh,
type
yeah,
it,
we
right?
just
We
We'll
just
just
type
type
it.
it. Okay.
Bye, Joy!
Bye, Joy.